After the Civil War, African Americans found themselves in a world where education was inaccessible despite their newfound freedom. Education was not a right, so African Americans were often excluded from white schools and found themselves without the means to open their own schools. Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington sought to overcome these circumstances by building Rosenwald schools through the Rosenwald Fund for African American Children. Wilkes County had hosted a large African American population, a higher percentage of African Americans than any other county in western North Carolina. Both free and slave families lived in Wilkesboro. Eventually, the area populated by African Americans came to be known as the Cairo community. It was from this community that a central part of African American life in North Wilkesboro emerged, Lincoln Heights Rosenwald School.
Hi, I'm Brenda Adams Dobbins, a 1966 graduate of the Lincoln Heights School in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. What we're going to show you today is the story of our school. It covered 5 counties. It was really built for 6 counties and Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears Roebuck, is instrumental in helping us get our school. It was built in 1923. It opened in 1924. We had 2 graduates in 1925. This was our home away from home, an opportunity for an education, for a high school education for people in Wilkes County. We had individual schools that was in our churches in the early years, and it only went to a 7th grade education. People had to go to High Point, North Carolina, to High Point Industrial Institute to get a high school education or to get a certificate where they could teach. A lot of our graduates went into the military in the early days. Most of here in rural Wilkes County, we were farming. In 1922, Booker T. Washington left Tuskegee, Alabama, and headed to Chicago to the Sears and Roebuck Company. Julius Rosenwald, a Jew, was president at the time, and he was seeking funds for Tuskegee. And when before Rosenwald would give him the money, he came south to see what the school systems looked like for the blacks. And he was so appalled that he says whatever money could be raised, he was going to match it. So I think Booker T died before he could see the effort, see the results of his effort. But Rosenwald got a field agent, and he set it up. And what the people in Wilkes County and surrounding counties did, I know Wilkes sold paper bricks for 25 cents. They did what we have now is yard sales and flea markets and vegetable stands. And the black community came together and sold their merchandise, their goods, in order to build a school. And the County Board of Education contributed so much money for it. Lincoln Heights started out as a 6-classroom building designed by Rosenwald's architect, and eventually was added on 4 classrooms and then 4 more classrooms. Where we're standing is the front of the school, the original front of the school. The school buses were parked here. The students were got off the bus and walked up to the steps and then went to their individual classrooms. No doubt there was 2 or 3 grades in each class because it actually covered 1 through 12 or 1 through 11. In 1943, the 12th grade was added. I started in the 1st grade room in 1955, and then they gave us a test, and I was one of the 12 or 15 that was moved up to the 2nd grade. So I started in 55 and graduated in 66. Wilkes County schools were integrated during the 65-66 school year, but I chose to stay, 41 of us chose to stay at Lincoln Heights to graduate. What you see, besides the artwork, is the original building, and then we'll show you where the next 4 rooms were added, and then the next 4 rooms. 4 years ago, well, we have a school reunion every 2 years. 4 years ago, 6 years ago, we hauled our chairs and tables and whatever we needed down to the new gym, but we could only get it until the 8th grade. To 8:30 at night because the guy had basketball in it. So when we got ready for the reunion 4 years ago, we said, we're going to clean up our rooms and we're going to have the reunions here. And the students are very happy. The thing is, with our school, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, we don't have the young people like we used to have. And somebody will have to take over when those of us that finished the school, the high school closed in 67, 68, 65, 66, 67. And then they moved the elementary school down to the high school that's adjacent to this. And they closed the school in 67, 68 permanently. It was later used as a vocational center for all the 4 high schools in Wilkes County. And then they added to the high school area. And then they did a daycare in our building. And then we had the daycare closed. And then we had the charter school in here for a couple of years. In 1986, the Board of Education was going to tear down Lincoln Heights. And Elizabeth Grenton, who was a student here, and then a 1935 graduate, and she lived on the Lincoln Heights Road. But she came down and threw up her hands and said, "You can't tear this down. This is all we have." And so she blocked it. And in 86, the Board of Education sold it to us for $1. Now, what we've been doing is taking a little at a time and renovating our school. What you can see now is the last phase that we've done with the roof. It has a metal roof that was put on here in 1923. And so we've had this part re-roofed, but we'll show you as we go through up on what the other roof looks like that we need to renovate now. We got indoor bathrooms when they did some construction, I guess in the early 50s, because the girls' bathrooms were on this side and the boys' bathroom was on this side. But we ended up with 14 classrooms. We enlarged our auditorium, which is now a multi-purpose room, and by taking one of the classrooms out. And then we have bathrooms upstairs now, where our stage used to be, behind the stage for the daycare. He helped build 5,300 schools for the colored citizens from Virginia to Texas. And Wilkes Training Center was built to serve Wilkes, Allegheny, Alexander, Ashe, Caldwell, and Yadkin counties. And the name changed to Lincoln Heights to help inspire the students to reach the heights of Lincoln. But that's Julius Rosenwald. Everybody was excited about coming to Lincoln Heights. People from Ashe, Allegheny, it was actually built for people in Watauga, but when I talked to them and asked them why they didn't choose to come to Lincoln Heights, it was because they lived closer to Tennessee. And so rather than ride the hour and a half plus to Lincoln Heights, they went to Tennessee to get their high school education. But we had students when I was here from Allegheny, Ash, some from Surrey, because they would come and live with some local people in order to get a high school education, and some from Caldwell County came. But we have the Herbert Bell Shaw Lodge that uses one of our classrooms. But other than that, and what we're hoping to do, we did tutoring at one point on Saturday mornings, but what we're hoping to do is to bring others in. People come in and have birthday parties, they've had repasses, family reunions. The community uses it, but the Lincoln Heights Recreation Corporation was made up in '86 of local people. All of the original board is deceased now, and so what we've got a board of 15 that is working to keep the school alive. Where we're standing was a parking lot for the teachers. We all rode the bus to school, and some people walked a mile to get to school. They didn't provide buses for people in the Cairo area or down Lincoln Heights Road. And they walked here to get their education in the rain, the snow, the sunshine, in order to live. But the families lived around Lincoln Heights. This is our Hall of Fame wall. People have either contributed $100,000 or they have, families have contributed $100,000 in memory of them. This is Elizabeth Parks Grinton. She was my 6th grade teacher, but she's the one that stood in front of the bulldozer and said, "You cannot tear this building down. It's historical. This is all we have." And so she prepared a video slideshow to show the Board of Education why we shouldn't. And Felix Stevens, an ag teacher here, was our first president. So all of these are contributors. A few of them are teachers, but most of them are alumni or alumni's children that have contributed to the Lincoln Heights Recreation Corporation and to save our building. Ms. Grinton and Leonard Tabor, a graduate of Lincoln Heights, did the first pictures that were going on this wall. And this one has G.C. Corbett in it, was the ag teacher for years. He was from Hillsborough, North Carolina, but he moved here. And this is Joseph Barber, that's a Wilkes County native, and he was my 8th grade teacher. But all of these on this side were pictures that they found in the archives, and different people had them, and they put their pictures here on the wall. Since then, we've had others that have added materials to the wall. I had people say to me, "You need to put this over in the Wilkes Museum." And I said, "Well, if we did, you'd have to pay to come see it. This way, you can see it, when you come in to use the building." This was the first ag shop, I assume. But this was built in 1939. And this was a building, as the population grew, school population grew, this was a 2-classroom building. And you see, this is where we were standing out. It was the parking lot out there. We presented Felix Stevens was the first president. And then Robert Buck Perkins was our second president. They're both deceased. But this was people were eager for an education. So everybody was wanting to come to Lincoln Heights to do their. We very seldom had discipline problems because the teachers were strict on us, and they told us what we would be facing out in life, and we believed them. Lincoln Heights was really originally built, and it was called Wilkes Training Center. And one of our I just drew a blank. One of our board members wanted to change the name to Lincoln Heights to influence us to reach the heights of Lincoln. So that's when it was changed. We had fundraisers throughout the years to buy the supplies to use for our education. And one of them was homecoming. So you've got the homecoming queen. Here's 3 of them. In 1940 was Virginia Anderson. 1960 was Carol Harris. And I'm not sure who this one is, but this was homecoming. That one with the raised the most money became the homecoming queen. And this is Edsel Dakins, E.V. Dakins. That was a principal here from 1961 until the school closed, and then he was our vocational director. And then we have a trio here that won a contest in 1955. It was Martha Kate, Angela Thomas, and Burns. What was her first name? Janice Burns. This is Miss Gritton's classroom. Now, she was strict. When you came in her classroom, you'd be ready to work. She didn't play. But she gave us what we needed to survive. That was my 6th grade, but this is not my class. It's a younger class. This is our homecoming committee. Can I switch you over here? Okay, we had a stage on here, and what you see here is the stage, and they took the stage out and built that wall, and there's a hallway behind it now to make it handicap accessible. So some people said we need to put the stage back, but if we do, it'll take away from our space that we overloading. But this was the homecoming committee that includes some teachers. This is a principal over here. No, this is a principal right here, Mr. Fox. And this is a football coach, Mr. Shepard. But most of them are parents, interested parents. We had plays galore, and this is Elizabeth Granton over here on the end. And pay very close attention. This is a Lincoln penny that was on the front of our stage. All righty. This is the pictures that Leonard Tabor found and Ms. Grinton found. But this was the 4th grade in 1937. This is the 8th grade in 1937. And my only regret is that I didn't put papers up here so people could tell me who their ancestors were. I know a few of them because if you look at that one right there, that's my aunt, my mom's sister. And everybody says, well, that's you. But it's not. This is the 9th grade in 1937, and they still in this building. The 2nd grade in 1937, Loree Anderson, she was Loree Harris Anderson, graduated, was a student here, and then came back and taught here for, I'd say, 20 years. She started out in Taylorsville. This one is the 5th grade. This is the 10th grade. This is the 1st grade. This is 1B and this is 1A, 1st grade. And this is a graduating class of 1937. And I'm not sure what year that one is. This is a 1965 class. This is a 1964 class, and this is our class in 1966. There was only 41 of us that graduated that year. Everybody else had integrated and gone into the white schools, or they had gone back to their counties and had to go to school there. This is a class of 1960. They didn't have a class picture, so they got together later on and had theirs. This is a class of 1942, 57. I think 57 was the first class that actually went to the high school building. The class of 56, when I started school, was here because I was in the first grade, and my aunt, my mama's baby sister, was in the 12th grade, and she was up here. This is the class of 66, half of them that was in Wilton Mitchell's class, excuse me, in the high school building. This is a class of 1950, and they've had several reunions, and this is, I told you about the 57. They were the first class that went to the high school. Now, we had football, homecoming and football. In February, we did the Sweethearts Ball, and in May, we always had a May Day activity. So I'm assuming, this is Elizabeth Grinton here, and I'm assuming that this was a May Day exercise, but we did platinum maypole and dance routines. Joyce Johnson, who was in the class of 1958, married Lazarus Johnson, and they moved from Richmond, Virginia, back to Wilkesboro, North Carolina, and she joined our board. She's deceased now, but this is what our roof looked like in the beginning. This is 100 years old, and this is on the inside, the opposite side of that board. Mr. Johnson framed this board, but this held up for 100 years and still holding up. Okay, this is our newspaper article from April the 7th, 1994, when they representing the basketball team, the homecoming, the parade. We had big parades, big downtown parades at Lincoln Heights during football season. This is Miss Grinton's first grade teacher, and she was at Lincoln Heights for 6 years. Here's Elizabeth Grinton. She was the grand marshal for our holiday parade for Wilkes County, and this is her in her later years. She was really instrumental in keeping the school going. So I'm assuming that she's happy with us now because we're moving it. One of our parents, and I'm assuming he's an alumni, built the replica of Lincoln Heights. And what you see here, this is the way you came in, and this is the back of the school. And what we had to do was to block it off because he actually had all the windows marked off, and some of the students poked the windows out. But this is the front of it. This was actually on a float one year with Miss Grinton. Had it. Now, let's get this. This, we had one black doctor in Wilkes County, Dr. Paisley, and he treated us for everything. He actually came, I remember him coming to the home when my daddy had pneumonia to treat him. He went to Meharry Medical School in Nashville, Tennessee. But he was a little short man, but this was his filing cabinet, his medicine cabinet. And this is Miss Granton's wall with all the awards that she received. This is when she graduated from Winston-Salem State, and then she went on to New York University in later years and got her master's degree. The school actually started out in the Presbyterian church, and then they ended up with Wilkes County. At Lincoln Heights. This is a replica that somebody had of the stoves that used to be in the classrooms, the coal stoves, and they gave it back to us. There's a group called the Women's Home and Community Betterment Club, and they raised funds one year for Lincoln Heights. And then 2 years ago, the Daughters of the American Revolution recognized Ms. Granton for her support in the schools. And this is one of our first graduates, Lily Virginia Harris. She graduated in 1925. This was the original clock that hung in the auditorium, and students would come in to tell how much time, or what time it was. I'm not sure they had bells then. The teachers just had to go by the clock in the auditorium. But this was the 3 classrooms, and this was the auditorium, and then there's 3 classrooms back here. The original 6 classrooms. Wilton Mitchell, who was a student here, he taught here till the school closed, and then after he retired, he started painting. He lived in Winston-Salem and went to Forsyth Tech, and he painted this picture and presented it to us. This one, I don't know who painted it, but the lady had it over her fireplace. And every year she'd let me take it down and bring it down to the school, or every other year for the school reunion. When she passed, the children gave it to Lincoln Heights. And that's where this inspired our t-shirt. Prior to that, all we had was the Lincoln Heights School and the Panther. But with the 100 years, we put this picture on the front of it. And you can see how the road came around and went. But this was the original 6 rooms. These individuals made it to 100. This was one of our teachers, and she lives almost at the Virginia line now. But she was 100 years old on January the 1st, Queen Esther Blackwell. These were students. She lives in Ashe County now. He lives in Sterling, Virginia. And he'll be 91 on December the 16th. And she was, 100 on December 16th. And she was 100 on June 30th. And that's her and her grandchildren. Let me tell you about her husband. She was born in Roaring River, but her mother moved to Wilkesboro with her and her sister. And her husband was one of those that came down from Ashe County, from Fleetwood, and came to school, that worked at Smitty's and came to school here during the week, and then would go home and work with Smitty's. He went into the military. He lived in Philadelphia. He's lived in several states, but he came back home, and he died maybe 10 years ago. But they built a beautiful home in Fleetwood, and she's still living there now. Here's the water heater that would keep the water hot. Here's where the wood would go in, and the ashes would come out here. And here's the oven. And he just could not believe, well, he could not believe that this stove was here. But I want to show you the original classroom. And I don't know how Miss Grinton, who she convinced to bring this stove, but when we were cleaning out the school so that we could have the reunion in our building, we had 2 tandem trucks that we filled up with stuff. But as we were cleaning up, we found this stove upstairs. So she had to get somebody to bring this upstairs. And then we put it on rollers and brought it down here and put it in our kitchen. And we've had people tell us, well, if you sell that stove, you can get that roof fixed. But we don't want to sell it. But this is our kitchen. And a lot of the tables were used at the daycare. But we've replaced the stoves. We've replaced the refrigerator. And so when we rent it, people can use this refrigerator. And then we've got this one with our things in it. All righty. This is our veteran room, thanking them for their service. And we've had programs for our veterans, but we've got them in alphabetic order. And every year when somebody comes in and says, where's my picture? And I said, you don't have one if you haven't given it to me. This is my brother-in-law, and he was killed in Vietnam on December of 1968. He's a 66 graduate from Lincoln Heights. And there's my husband right there with it. But all of these, and then we've got he was buried in he was fighting in North Korea, so he's buried in the cemetery in Hongman, North Korea on December the 20th, 1950. This was a prisoner of war, and he died while a prisoner of war, Gwen R. Hunt. But people say, I can't believe we had that many people in service. And I said, well, we still have, we probably haven't even scratched the surface with our veterans. Right here, one lady had 5, 6. He's the youngest one, so he wasn't with them. But these were in 6, she had 6 soldiers, 6 of her sons in the war at the same time, in service to our country. And how I got started doing veterans, I worked one year at the Wilkes County Public Library, and this lady had done scrapbooks. And what she did, the last 2 pages were black guys. And so I copied those, and then I've just added to it as my uncle died 2 years ago, and he spent 20 years in service. And his wife sent me this from Philadelphia to go in this room. We got 2 Navy brothers that was on the same ship that was featured in a local newspaper June 11, 2003. Here's 2 brothers that were in the Marine Corps. He's actually a twin, but he didn't. His other one didn't go in. And then this is their older brother. This is Weaver Hunt, and he was a World War I veteran, and he lived to be 100 years old. But he died in 86. This is my great-great-grandfather, and he was a slave. And I've got an article that says that he came to, his slave master sent him to Wilkesboro every day, once a week, to get the mail. And there was a white lady that would read to him the newspaper and tell him where the Union soldiers were. So when they came through Roaring River, Grandpa Abe left the horse in the field and joined the Union Army. So he came back and had a little paper that said he was a free man. And he had 7 sons and 4 daughters. So his story was in the local paper. This is one of his grandsons. Steve Blackburn he brought me this picture one year, and I tried to give it back to him, and he says, no, you keep it. He says, nobody else will appreciate it the way you do, but he spent 20 years in the service, and he's deceased now. And then I've got others. This was an article in the local paper that I typed out. And this was those that were called. And some of these, their pictures are on the wall. And then it starts with my 5x7s. With all the soldiers. This is one of Grandpa Abe's son. And this is his Claude's son, and other is Claude's son that was in service. This mural was painted by the gentleman here, and I should have looked at that before. But one of our alumni, had him to paint the mural, and they brought it here on an 18-wheeler. But it takes us from Africa all the way to Washington, D.C. in the classrooms with our heroes, our Union soldiers, from the cotton field to Washington. This is one of the most original classrooms that we have, at least one that people can actually come in and see. They've paneled the walls, but you've got the original windows that Rosenwald had, because these in 1923 there was not any electricity. So he had them where the sun would hit the chalkboard with them. Now this was my 7th grade classroom, and we're trying to make it as original as it possibly can be. This is Sarah Lou Harris Carter. She was the first black model for Ebony and Jet. She modeled for Lucky Strike. She went to Bennett College. I'm an Aggie. And she graduated, came here and worked 2 years, and then she started modeling. And this is her husband. He was an ambassador to Africa. And she's with First Lady. And they lived in the D.C. area. She died about 2 years ago. The stove that you saw, now this room was full of papers. So we had to go through every one of them. I found NAACP minutes from 1949 in this room. So we had to look through all the boxes. And behind this, the post office gave this to Miss Grinton. But in this corner right here is where that wood stove was. And when I started moving stuff and seen it, I just hollered. I was so excited because we had found it. But we learned to type on the manual typewriters. And this is one of the band uniforms, and it belongs to Maurice Whittington. When he was in elementary school. And what I've done is we've got some of the teachers, the basketball players. We've had Milton Parks was county commissioner, is the only black county commissioner we've ever had. So he was over the United Way at one point. This is Bob Graham was a student here, and then he taught here. He was at East Wilkes when I went there in 71, 72. He's still living. Nellie Harris was our typing teacher, and her husband, Richard, was our science teacher, but she's still alive. And there's most of us with alive and kicking with it. This was Steve Neal, one of our representatives from the state that was talking to a group of us when we were trying to save the school. He was influential. Mr. E.V. Dakins that I showed you earlier was a principal. We were the Panthers. Alexander Irwin was a history teacher. He was one of the first teachers that they took out of Lincoln Heights to go to Wilkesboro School to teach. They actually came into his classroom and observed him to see if he could teach. But he's still alive. Here's Miss Harris again. Ed Broadus trained George Foreman, and Sam Barnes was a sweetheart. He worked at Belk's for 37 years. And you could see he was always around whenever you went into shop. This was in a local paper recently that he worked on the dialysis unit. This was in 2008 that he was in here. Clyde Walter Holloway is a chiropractor. He lives in Winston-Salem now. This is one of the graduate students. One of our alumni students that was the top teacher of the year. He lives in Decatur, Georgia, and he composes and writes plays. This is Adine Frankie. She made the A&T's Hall of Fame. And this is one of the first group, the North Wilkesboro Academic and Industrial Institutes, with the first black school for blacks in the county. This is fascinating because this is one of our parades. One of the floats in the parade. They even got the donkey with a hat on. And I think that's all that we'll do. Oh, the lights. I was doing a program at our church, and I found the first wedding that was at church when I was probably about 10 or 12 years old. And one of the deacons said, "Brenda, look at the lights in there. You mean to tell me we've been having the same lights in the church for that long?" And I said, "Yes." So they changed the lights out, and I asked them for the bulbs. And so one of the rooms down there has still got one bulb in it. So what we've got to do is get a ladder and hang these bulbs, but we don't want them hung until we know that they're going to stay up here. And it happened to be 6 that wasn't broken or cracked with it. I couldn't remember. I knew it was Reuben, but I didn't want. But Reuben White was the one that said, "Let's change it to Lincoln Heights instead of the Wilkes Training Center." We had all kind of plays. And you see the Lincoln Penny that was here on stage. Here's a group of students from the old academy. They didn't get to come to Lincoln Heights, but they were getting their education the best way they could. I don't know if you've got that or not, because that was that little one. But that's the school buses parked around the front of the school. This was Mr. Harper, Bert Harper, who was a principal of Lincoln Heights. And E.V. Dakins, that was a principal of Lincoln Heights. And I've got one of Mr. Elam. Governor Sanford came to Lincoln Heights in 62, 63. And this is us in the auditorium. And nobody was fighting because they didn't have room. But we had the folding chairs, seats in here in the auditorium. We talked about the two-room classroom building. This was the high school with the new gym. Now, this is what I want to show you. This is in 1939 when they building the gym. We had proms in the gym, graduations in the gym. There's some more pictures of it. And this is in 1963. That was a PE class. And Mr. Dakins is sitting there with them. And there's the gym again. North Wilkesboro had a city system, and it had Wilkes Central in it, and this was the black school. This was the elementary school for the black kids. They came to us in the 9th grade, but this one is still standing. It's a daycare now, and they're wanting to tear it down, but the black people really don't have any say-so, but I think they're kind of afraid to tear it all the way down. But that was a feeder school. This was a feeder school in Boomer, where Effley, but this wasn't the one that he went to, but this was one of the early ones. And here's a feeder. This one is Thankful number 2. This is Cherry Lane in Sparta. The interesting things about these is they had 4 classrooms. Woodlawn had 4 classrooms. So they had 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, and 7th and 8th grade. And then they came to us in high school. I found several annuals. Well, Mom and Daddy graduated in 40 and 42. So this is out of one of their classrooms, one of their annuals. This was down on the big field when you see the gym over here. But they said, well, who are those students? And I said, well, it's probably was me, because I was a tomboy. And girls are lined up here and the boys, but that's how we played, because I started wearing pants to class in 68, 69 at A&T. This is one of our reunions. And these are different classes. This is one that we've talked about, but these were some of the classes that were in the 60s. Let's see what we've got here. This was in the new gym. This is where we had them registered. This was homecoming right here. This was in 93. This is the class of 61. My brother-in-law was deceased, and these are his classmates that came to the funeral. He lives in Indiana. He was in Connecticut at the time, and I'm not sure where Robert Louis Stevenson was. And he lives in Connecticut. This is the Lincoln Heights chapter of New Farmers of America in 48-49. See how I save everything. And this was in the 40s, a basketball team. I had a parent, this basketball team. One of our alumni called me up. She lives in Greensboro, and she gave me these pictures. This was her basketball group. Here's a football group. It's amazing. When I went to East Wilkes in 71, 72, they didn't have a girls basketball team. But we had girls basketball in 48, 49. Nice. There's the football team in 39, the Mayday Court in 41, the Mayday Court in 1939, and I don't have that one labeled. And there's the early baseball team. I showed you the picture of one of our first graduates, but when we had our reunion in September of 87, Moselle Cundiff came to it. Now she and several of them, she was a teacher, but several of the men fought for us to have voting rights in Wilkes County, and I have a copy of that that protest. That was the first reunion. It drew over 1,500 people. This is one of the lower classrooms down there below the cornerstone marker. And there's people exhibiting. That was from the health department. This was when and this is Lib Gretton and Buck Perkins. And this is when they cut the ribbon to give us the school back. Oh, I meant to show you something down in that room. Mr. Elan, they were looking at his little black book, and what I did was I blew up the pages and I had them in notebooks, and they're on the desk down there, and people were going in there reading about their parents and their grandparents with it. That's a picture of people looking. This is Miss Blackwell, with Jane Wilburn and I. But she's the one that lives near the Virginia line now, up 158. But she came to every reunion except the last one. We do fashion shows. This is an early parade. This is Sarah Alexander, one of our homecoming queens, and then this is a little Miss Lincoln Heights, and we've got her picture over there. This is floats from the parades, cars. Now look at this. It's being driven by a tractor. Here's our band going down Main Street in North Wilkesboro. There's a woman driving that tractor. Now, the one thing they didn't teach me was how to drive, but I said I will drive someday. And there's the little brownies were on a float. Here again is Sarah Lou Harris on the Jet magazine, and then this was her at age 93. Deneen Graham was Miss North Carolina. This was one of our Valentine dances, a fundraiser. On top, fundraiser for each of Homecoming Queen, Valentine's, and May Day were the queens and the kings at that time. And here's a group. And this is a Sweetheart's Ball. Now this is when a lot of them, when they get through at this room, this is what it looks like to get ready for a birthday party. Oh, we've seen that. This is my husband. This is class of 62. And this is what the auditorium looked like with the seats in it. And they're standing on the steps of the stage. This is a second grade class in 1961. This was interesting. This was a class of 59. They did individual pictures of them in their paper. And this is my class in the 9th grade. Now, this was a new teacher, so they didn't give him as many students as they gave one of the season's teachers, because this is the one that painted the picture out there with it. And let's see what else I've got here. This is an early group of students. This is the last graduating class from 1967. And I tried my best to get them together so that we could do something, and they didn't do it. Our class has been close all along. We celebrated our 50th in Charleston, South Carolina. We used to get together on Saturday evenings and say, "Come on, where we're going to eat?" But they'd never gotten together. And it's strange. And this was the 8th and 7th grade class in 62, 63. I did a book because we didn't have annuals for each year, I got class pictures from every class. And if we didn't have their pictures, we had their names. And I did a booklet. And then I included the ones that were in the 63 annual in it. But that's us.